Hello, I'm Calvin Weiss. We have two key novel technologies that underlie our blood testing process. The first technology is our solid surface-free isolator, which is a hybrid of ultrafiltration and field flow fractionation. It was conceived in response to the teaching and tutelage of Dr. Thomas Juice, head of biochemistry at the NMI and at the University of Tübingen. Dr. Juice is a foremost expert in the field of protein arrays. The second technology, which is the subject of this discussion, is our concentrator. It was conceived in response to the teaching and tutelage of Dr. Richard Yost, head of analytical chemistry at the University of Florida. Dr. Yost is the inventor of the tandem mass spectrometer, which is the most widely used form of mass spectrometry, and he currently serves as the president of the American Society of Mass Spectrometry, the largest scientific society for mass spectrometry. This concentrator seeks to address two problems we encounter in mass spectrometry: inadequate sensitivity and low throughput. Sensitivity is the minimum concentration that can be detected. Throughput is how long it takes to detect and characterize a sample. Typical forms of mass spectrometry can't detect low abundance molecules of interest that we call analytes. There are lots of useful and interesting analytes in blood that are too low in abundance for mass spectrometry detection. Typical forms of mass spectrometry require several minutes of instrument time for detection. The instruments are very expensive, and so the cost of several minutes of instrument time is very high. Our products need high sensitivity so that we can test a lot of interesting and useful analytes that circulate in blood at low abundance. Our products need to be very low cost. Thus, we need high sensitivity and high throughput, significantly higher than what is typically found in mass spectrometry. Dr. Yost taught us that we can increase sensitivity by getting the analytes closer together. So if we can isolate the analytes from the other molecules in our isolator and then remove most of the solvent carrying the analytes, we can achieve the high sensitivity we seek. Dr. Yost also taught us that mass spectrometry instruments are idle most of the time. As much as 99% of the time they're idle. During that idle time, the instrument is waiting for the analyte to be injected. Most mass spectrometry inject analytes off liquid chromatography columns that have the powerful capability of samples entering with all their molecules mixed evenly together and exiting with each kind of molecule grouped together and separated from the other kinds. This separation is a very useful means to avoid ionization suppression that plagues mass spectrometry. But it comes at the high cost of the time required to perform this useful separation. If we can avoid the instrument sitting idle while this separation is performed, instrument time and attendant cost behavior can be dramatically decreased. This ionization suppression is the Achilles heel of mass spectrometry. Molecules must be electrically charged or ionized in order to be detected by mass spectrometry. Unfortunately, in mass spectrometry, the ionization is biased against the low abundance molecules. Ionization is unfair. High abundance molecules are disproportionately ionized. It's like the low abundance molecules are discriminated against. That is why it is important to separate the analytes from the other molecules so that They are not discriminated against and can achieve the ionization required for detection. There are conditions where ionization suppression is known to diminish. In very low nanoflow ionization regimes, in the order of 10 to 20 nanoliters per minute, ionization suppression diminishes. It is hypothesized that in these regimes, droplets that carry the molecules gets much smaller, approaching unity, 1 molecule per droplet. At this unity, the molecules no longer are competing with each other for the available charges that surround the droplets. And as a single droplet evaporates, the single molecule has full accessibility to those charges. So there are conditions that are known to be favorable for our requirements. If we can, 1, isolate the analytes from the other molecules. 2, reduce the distance separating the analytes. 3, do this offline from the mass spectrometer. 4, batch these samples in close proximity inside injection channels. And 5, inject batches of samples to the mass spectrometer as very small droplets. We can achieve our requirements. This has proven to be a very difficult engineering challenge because of the very small size scale. To reduce the distance separating the analytes requires removal of most of the solvent carrying the analytes. That's called concentrating. The removal process needs to be done in a way that removes the solvent without removing the analytes, such as that the solvent decreases. The analytes move closer together. Further, it must be done in conditions that avoid the risk of analytes adsorbing to solid surfaces. Solid surfaces are the enemy of very small scale. As scale gets smaller, the ratio of solid surface to volume increases at an exponential rate. This dramatically limits the solution space for this problem. And as this scale gets smaller, fabricating difficulty gets exponentially greater. After diligently working on this problem, we have now found the solution space for this problem. Inkjet droplet ejection. Inkjet droplet ejection is well-known and highly developed technology that excels at the precise formation and manipulation of small liquid droplets. Droplets in the picoliter and even femtoliter scale can be uniformly ejected with high spatial resolution. The technology and expertise for deployment is reasonably accessible. It has become clear to us that with this technology, the solution almost writes itself. Inkjet droplet ejection is particularly well suited for concentration. Concentration is done by ejecting small droplets from the ejector that is aimed at a collection tube oriented some distance from the ejector. As such, the droplets fly through the atmosphere as they move from the ejector to the collector. As they fly through the atmosphere, they are prone to evaporation. As they evaporate in flight, they get smaller and their surface area decreases. As the surface area decreases, the analytes carried inside the droplet move closer and closer together. The conditions that impact evaporation, like temperature, atmospheric pressure, humidity, speed, and time of flight, are controlled to optimize the landing droplet size. The landing droplet size needs to be as small as possible to maximize concentration, but not so small that it fully evaporates, leaving the analytes free with no carrier. The collector is a partially oil-filled capillary tube oriented vertically with the unfilled portion of the tube facing upward like a cup to be filled. The volume that is unfilled is the concentrated volume. The ejector is oriented above the collector with the ejector facing downward such that the droplets will eject precisely into the center of the unfilled portion of the collector tube. As the droplets eject, the tube fills to the top with the nearly evaporated droplets. When fully filled, the droplets continue to eject, now onto the solvent surface of the concentrated solvent in the tube. As the droplets contact the solvent surface, the volume of the solvent exceeds the volume of the tube and results in the solvent cresting upward, forming a meniscus. The meniscus extends into the atmosphere where it evaporates, leaving the annulets free in the solvent. The surface tension of the solvent interacting with the surface of the tube is tuned such that the solvent never contacts any of the upward-facing solid surface of the tube. As such, the annulets avoid any risk of adsorbing to solid surfaces. This results in the annulets carried in the droplet accumulating and increasing in concentration at the surface of the solvent. The increased concentration creates a diffusion gradient which transports the annulets away from the surface. When the sample is completely ejected and evaporated into the collector tube, droplets of oil are ejected from the distal end of the collector tube, making room at the top of the collector tube for the next sample. The volume ejected is the volume required to contain the oil spacer used to separate each concentrated sample plus the concentrated volume. The oil spacer is ejected into the collector tube by the oil injector. Then the next sample is ejected and concentrated into the collector tube as described. This continues till the collector tube is filled to its capacity of sample segments. When filled, the collector tube is reoriented horizontally with its distal end oriented toward the mass spectrometry injection port. A high voltage is impressed between the mass spectrometry injected port and the solvent in the collector tube. Femtoliter droplets are ejected from the collector tube into the injection port for detection until all samples are injected into the mass spectrometer where they are detected and characterized. The significance of this technology is the very high level of concentration available in the order of 3 or 4 orders of magnitude, coupled with the effective manipulation of the resulting nanoliter volume sample sizes. With it, the high sensitivity and high throughput that has largely eluded the practice of mass spectrometry becomes realizable. That's how we do it.